Hello folks, it's Pierce Chaser again. Welcome to another video, and in this one we're going to look at some photographs of Scottish trains and stations in the late 1980s and early 1990s. This is not the video that I intended to make. I bought a job lot of photographs of trains at Wester Hailes railway station in the west of Edinburgh in 1989. So I bought them on eBay. Unfortunately Royal Mail lost them, so I never took delivery of them. So I couldn't make the originally intended video. So I sulked for a bit, and then I realised that wasn't really helping the channel in any way, shape or form. So I went back on eBay and got some substitute photographs. So I've got a couple of pictures of Wester Hailes station without any trains in it. And I've got some photos of the types of trains that were in the pictures that Royal Mail lost. And then I've also got 3 shots from Edinburgh in 1992 that I was going to use in the original production. I'll explain why they're relevant as we go along. And I've got a random bus photograph as well, which again I will explain the relevance of. So Wester Hailes station is on the line between Haymarket East Junction and Mid Calder Junction, where the line splits. One branch goes through Shotts to Holytown Junction and then on into Glasgow Central, and the other one goes to Carstairs on the West Coast main line, where there's a triangular junction with the main line itself. Wester Hailes station opened in May 1987 to serve the housing estate of the same name, which had been constructed in the 1970s. In 1991, the line from Haymarket to Carstairs was electrified. It was done as an add-on to the East Coast Mainline electrification, and that allowed the Edinburgh portions of West Coast Mainline and cross-country express services, which had been diesel-hauled from Carstairs through to Edinburgh, to be electrically hauled. Some of them, like Birmingham to Edinburgh, electrically hauled all the way through. It also allowed a service from London King's Cross to Glasgow Central via Edinburgh, Haymarket, and then along the line and down to Carstairs and then back up to Glasgow. It was quite circuitous, but it allowed a through service to the East Coast Main Line and King's Cross as well. The service calling at the station was the Glasgow to Edinburgh via Shotts route, which was diesel worked. There were also a few short workings at peak times as well. There was an Edinburgh to West Calder short, and there was a Monday to Friday North Berwick to Cape Newton working as well. But they remained diesel operated because the line between Mid Calder Junction and Holytown Junction wasn't electrified. They were worked by first generation DMUs till around 1990, then 150s took over and then 156s. And the 156s continued to work until 2019, when the line from Mid Calder Junction through to Holytown Junction was finally electrified, and that enabled the Glasgow to Edinburgh via Shotts service to be worked by electric units. Now I know what you're thinking. Pierce suggested this is not your normal geographical area. Why are you doing a video about trains in the west of Edinburgh? Well, the answer is buses. As a kid in Yorkshire, I was fascinated by pictures of Scottish buses. They had different types than the ones we had in England, and they also had different liveries. We had the National Bus Company in either red or green. Scotland had the Scottish Bus Group in various shades of red and green, but also maroon, blue, yellow, etc. And I was also particularly taken with photographs of the Edinburgh area municipal fleet, Lothian Regional Transport, who now run as Lothian buses. They're still in operation today and still municipally owned as well. But they look brilliant in their smart maroon and white livery. But I'd never seen a Lothian bus in real life. Indeed, the only Scottish buses I had seen were some Scottish CityLink coaches that I saw working through Hull one day. I can't remember where they were going or what they were doing, but they were the only Scottish buses I'd ever seen, because I'd never been to Scotland. Now that changed on April the 4th, 1992, when I was aged 14, and my dad booked me and himself on a rail tour from Hull to Edinburgh. It went out via Leeds, the Settling Carlisle line and the West Coast Main Line, and it came back via the East Coast Main Line and a quick left turn at Hambleton Junction. We had a few hours in Edinburgh. I recall going to Hab and Hobby's model shop on Leith Walk. We picked up some Lothian bus timetables for an inquiry office. Unfortunately, I haven't got those anymore. I don't know what happened to them. They got lost along the way somewhere. But the rail tour emerged from a cutting, and I saw across a patch of grassland some rather brutalist looking blocks of flats, in front of which were some maroon and white buses, and I was absolutely hooked. My first view of Lothian buses. I read a sign that said Wester Hailes Shopping Centre, and then we passed through a station that was also called Wester Hailes, and that is why Wester Hailes has put itself in my consciousness, and why when I saw some photos for sale on eBay that unfortunately Royal Mail lost, I wanted to make a video about the place featuring the photographs. So to start off, we've got a couple of photographs of Wester Hailes station itself. As I said, it opened on May the 11th, 1987, and these were taken about 6 months later in November of 1987. They appear to be some kind of official record shot from the way they're taken. I don't know who took them, I don't know who the photographer was. I've just bought them and they're in my collection now. Both of them appear to be looking towards Edinburgh. This first one from the Edinburgh bound platform. You can see it was quite a basic station, a couple of platforms, a couple of shelters, although the shelters are quite generously proportioned to enable people to take cover from the Scottish weather. But it all looks very clean and new and modern, as indeed it was. It was only 6 months old at the time. So the second photo is also looking towards Edinburgh, but from the Glasgow bound platform. And again, you can see all looks clean and new and modern. You can see Wester Hailes itself around the station in both of the views. So next up, we've got some views of the type of trains that were featured in the photographs that Royal Mail lost. Basically, the service Glasgow to Edinburgh via Shotts was worked by Class 107s and Class 101s, DMUs, diesel multiple units. So we're going to start with the Class 107. This is set 107426, arriving at Edinburgh Waverley on an unknown date, but before the end of 1988. We'll explain that in a moment. This photo and the four that follow it were bought from eBay. They were taken by the late Andrew Hoskins and the copyright of Derek Hoskins, and they're shared under Wikimedia Commons License 2.0. So the 107s were built in 1960. There were 26 three-car sets, so 78 vehicles altogether, and they were built by British Railways Derby Works. But apart from that, they were as Scottish as Nicola Sturgeon drinking whisky in a kilt factory. They were allocated to Scottish depots all of their working lives. The final units were withdrawn from passenger service in 1992, but even then 3 units remained as Sandite sets until 1994. Although they were visually similar to the more numerous and more widespread Class 108, the 107s were heavyweight units with steel bodies, whereas the 108s were lightweight sets with bodywork largely constructed from aluminium. The body profile of the 107 was slightly different to the 108 because of the steel construction. They were flatter sided around the windows. You see on there the windows are flat, whereas the panelling and the windows on the 108 curved very slightly as well. And the windows on the 107 were very, very slightly lower down. There's a little bit more of the cant rail between the top of the window and the roof. So 107426 consisted of driving motor brake standard DMBS 51986, which is the leading vehicle in this view. Trailer standard lavatory TSL 59803 and DMSL driving motor standard lavatory, formerly DMCL driving motor composite lavatory. It had first class seating, but that had been removed or declassified, should we say. I think the seats were still there, but they've been declassified to standard, so it was running as a DMSL. Numbered 52018. In January of 1988, the unit was allocated to Air, so it was unlikely to have visited Edinburgh, but at the end of 1988, the 107s were renumbered, the sets. They had 300 added to the set number, so instead of being 1074, etc., they became 1077, etc. So 107426 became 107726. So this view would be sometime in 1988, after the unit transferred from Air to Glasgow Eastfield Depot and before it was renumbered. It may well be coming in from Glasgow via Shotts. It's certainly on the right side of the approach to Edinburgh Waverley station, which is where it's coming into, but we can't be sure. It's not recorded by the photographer. As you can see, it carries the Strathclyde Passenger Transport Executive PTE livery with Strathclyde's Transport branding. The livery was officially known as Strathclyde Red and Black, and I know what you're thinking, Pacer Chaser, that is orange. Yes, it is. Let me explain. When the PTE was formed in 1974, it was known as Greater Glasgow PTE, and it used on its buses a green, yellow and white livery. Trains remained in either British Rail blue or blue and grey livery with Transclyde branding, and some of them had the GG logo, Greater Glasgow, alongside the Transclyde bit. In the early 80s, the PTE rebranded itself as Strathclyde PTE and decided to use an orange and black livery. But if you're familiar with the social, religious and political history of West Scotland, you'll know that orange is quite a controversial colour. So to avoid any problems, the PTE declared that this most obviously orange colour was actually Strathclyde red, and that was what they were using. So that's why it's known as Strathclyde red with black. Either way, it's a cracking livery. It looked really, really good on the 107s. Some 101s carried it as well, which we'll see in a bit. And later on, some 156s carried it. And them and the buses that carried it all looked really, really good. Really nice livery. So next up, we've got another 107 in Strathclyde PTE livery approaching Edinburgh Waverley, but on the other side of the alignment. Again, we don't know where it's come from. We can't read the set number. It's one of those tantalising photographs where you can almost read the number but not quite, although we can see it's a 1074 number, so it's again before the end of 1988. The only reason that I bought it and I've included it here is it's a cracking shot. Honestly, it's really, really nice, and hats off to Andrew Hoskins for taking it, because at the time it was taken, that unit would have been as common as muck. And you can guarantee if there were 20 photographers stood on the end of Edinburgh Waverley's platforms, 19 of them would go, I'm not wasting film on that, and not take a picture of it. But of course, it was well worth taking a picture of, because looking at it now, you think, wow, you know, what was once everyday and commonplace is long gone, and it looks really, really nice. So, you know, next time you're out taking pictures somewhere, say for example Doncaster, and there's a little old 150 parked there, spluttering away in a bay platform, and you think, is it worth it? Yeah, it is, because it won't be there forever. But yeah, as I say, hats off to Andrew Hoskins for taking that absolutely gorgeous shot. Really, really nice. And, you know, as I say, what was once commonplace, now consigned to the history books. So next up, we've got another Andrew Hoskins picture. It's a bit of a mystery, this one, to be honest. By autumn of 1990, all the remaining Class 107s were based at Eastfield Depot in Glasgow. And they worked from Glasgow Queen Street to Dunblane and Falkirk Gramston, and from Glasgow Central to Edinburgh via Shotts, which is the line that we're interested in. During 1990, the units had 700 subtracted from their set numbers to avoid clashing with Class 158s. They've been renumbered from the 107-4 series to avoid confusion with Class 156s that were coming into service at the end of 1988. And in 1990, they were renumbered out of the 107-7 series to avoid confusion with Class 158s that were coming into service in 1990. So this set would have been 107-434 up to the end of 1988, then 107-734, and then in 1990 it was renumbered to 107-034. Now the date, location and occasion are not recorded, but it's, as I say, it's a bit of a mystery. As you can see, the end vehicle here carries blue and grey livery, as some of the 107s did right up to the end of their lives. Not all of them were repainted into Strathclyde PTE colours. Some of them even carried the Transclyde branding from the old Greater Glasgow PTE days up until the end of service in the 1990s. Now the genuine 107-034 was all blue and grey, but if I just move the light slightly, and I'm sorry about the reflection, I'm struggling with the lighting, you can just about see that the centre car is in Strathclyde PTE livery, orange and black. Sorry, Strathclyde red and black. Now, that means it isn't the full set 107-034. It's obviously, this vehicle has been put with some other vehicles but just kept the set number. So this is DMBS, Driving Motor Brake Standard 51994. We don't know the identity of the TSL and the DMSL behind it. But as we said, the ensemble has kept the DMBS's unit number, the set number. In July 1991, the last of the 107s were transferred from Eastfield in Glasgow up to Edinburgh's Haymarket Depot to eke out the final years on peak hour 5 circle duties. As I said earlier on, the last of them were removed from service in 1992, but 3 sets survived for another 2 years until Sandite units, and there were 3 vehicles preserved at the Strathspey Railway, 1 DMBS and 2 DMCL. Sadly, nobody preserved a centre car, so you couldn't do a full 3-car unit in preservation. Going back to the photo, 51994 is looking worn inside now. You can see the paint's fading and peeling off around the windscreen. The Scottish region smartened up the blue and grey units in a lot of cases by putting black window surrounds on, the same as the Strathclyde ones had. But as you can see, the black paint's kind of faded and worn. The inside of the door, you can see the wooden panelling's all faded and scuffed as well. And the destination blind has presumably snapped and been taken out. You can just see the bulb shining through the glass that would illuminate the blind normally, but the blind's missing. You just see the bare bulb. Despite all this, it's on some form of special duty. I'm not quite sure what it's doing. If anybody does know what it was doing, please let me know in the comments, because it's got a headboard on it. This is obviously the back of the train. It's showing tail lights, but it's got a little headboard on, which at first glance I thought was showing an Eastfield Scotty dog, but it isn't. It's some sort of weird cryptid creature that appears to be a hybrid between a lion, a cat and a sausage dog. So if anybody knows, as I say, what this unit was doing, then please let me know. So the other type of unit in the FOTS that the Royal Mail lost, that regularly operated on the Glasgow to Edinburgh via shot service, was the Class 101. These were ubiquitous. Anywhere between Dundee and Penzance you could see one of these, and they survived in service in the Manchester area up to the end of 2003. In the early 90s, regional railways needed to refurbish some first generation units because they realised they didn't have enough second generation ones. They were going to do Class 108s, but they realised they were in quite a bad state. The fixings that held the body to the chassis were not particularly in good condition, so they decided to do Class 101s instead. And as I say, some of them survived until December 2003 in the Manchester area. 633 vehicles were built, formed variously into 2, 3 and 4 car sets. They were constructed by Metropolitan Camel of Birmingham between 1956 and 1959. They were the most numerous of British Rail's first generation DMUs. As I say, you could see them more or less everywhere. Many of the Scottish ones were smartened up with black windscreen surrounds, as you can see on this one. This is set 101319, arriving at Edinburgh Waverley, presumably from Bathgate. We'll come to that in a minute. So the set comprised of vehicle DMBS 51245, TCL, trailer composite lavatory in other words, but by this day declassified and all standard, class 59525, and a DMCL, although again that had been declassified, so it was technically a DMSL, 53269. It's 53269 that's leading the unit here. In 1986, the line between Edinburgh and Bathgate, which had been freight only since 1956, reopened to passengers. Now, there was a chronic shortage of DMUs in Scotland at the time because the Class 107s had temporarily been withdrawn for some sort of maintenance and safety checks. So they were out of service and there weren't any units to operate the new service with. So they borrowed temporarily some Class 143s that were brand new. They intercepted them on the way to where they were going to work in Newcastle and that area, and they ran them on the Bathgate line for a period of time. When the situation eased, they replaced them with Class 101s, but they smartened up a few sets for the Bathgate line. You can see 101319, as well as having been polished up and generally buffed. It's got Edinburgh Bathgate branding in the windscreen, the centre windscreen there, and you just about see there's some writing on the side, just under the first side window, and that would have read Bathgate Link. Needless to say, the Bathgate branded units tended to wander about onto other services, so eventually the branding was removed and the Bathgate service was worked by any old DMU, as everything else was as well. But yeah, another cracking shot by the late Andrew Hoskins. So the final Andrew Hoskins shot we've got in this video is this one of Class 101, set number 101363, taken at Largs. At the time it was allocated to Air Depot, and as you can see it carried Strathclyde PT livery, Strathclyde red and black. It looks a bit battle scarred, to be honest. You can see the rusty mark next to the sort of the tail light, the head and tail light on the front. This set had frequent changes in its formation, so we're not entirely sure what the other two vehicles are. The nearest vehicle is DMSL, formerly DMCL, again declassified first class section to make it all standard, but 53194, we can tell that by the front end damage. Apologies, it wouldn't be a Pacer Chaser video if something didn't go wrong, would it? But yeah, so this is 53194 DMSL, but the other two vehicles behind it we're not quite sure. The most common formation of this set was that there were two DMSLs either side of a centre car that had a brake section, so a TBSL, a trailer brake standard lavatory. But yeah, as we said, the set had frequent changes of formation, and it probably explains the rather wonky looking 3 at the end of the unit number. It's probably been 10136 something else, and then that vehicle has been substituted into 363, and the N3 is an afterthought. But you can see the Air Depot sticker on the front of it, the allocation AY. Something notable, most of the 101s when they were refurbished in the late 70s and early 80s had the high level marker light removed, the one above the blind, but as you can see this unit didn't, and quite a few of the Scottish based 101s tended to retain that as well. It does have a destination blind fitted, but you can just about see that the glass is filthy and you can barely read it. It does actually say Glasgow Central. If you squint at the photograph you can just read it, but it just shows that a lot of the Scottish units were very hard worked, as indeed BR's units were generally, but the Scottish ones in particular look quite war-torn. That they worked hard for a living. They weren't mollycoddled in any way, and you can see by the general state of this vehicle, even though it has been repainted, probably not long before the photo was taken, it does look a little bit battle scarred. Another thing to note as well, it has got the second man side wiper, which a lot of DMUs had taken off. If you looked at the 107 photos earlier on, you noticed it had a wiper on the driver's side. So it has at least retained something that a lot of the other units hadn't. So now we catch up with the some photos that were meant to be in the original production, some of mine. This is a photo of 91017 being ruined by a young pacer chaser. This is on the visit in April 1992 that I mentioned, the 4th of April 1992. You see a rather nice ScotRail Edinburgh Waverley sign as well there. 91017 later became 91117 when it was refurbished. It was taken off lease in September of 2019 and passed on to Europhoenix, but it was used as a spares donor for the rebuild of the Class 8989001. But there it is in much happier times, still not far off being new, Edinburgh Waverley. Next up is a photo of Mr Pacer Chaser Senior, my late father, sitting near the buffer ends in front of 3 of Haymarket's allocation of the time. Again, April the 4th, 1992. Class 150s 152.52 and 152.60 behind, and then Class 158, 158.710. Just at the left hand side of the shot as well, you can see a Strathclyde livery Class 156, and that was 156.503. Now, when I was doing the research for this video, I blew my own mind because I didn't believe that when I took this photograph 33 years ago, I'm doing this video in May 2025, so it is 33 years and 1 month since I took this picture, and all of those units at the moment are still in passenger carrying service, believe it or not. 152.52 and 152.60 with Transport for Wales based at Cardiff Canton, although they are due for withdrawal very, very shortly as I'm doing this. 158.710 is still in ScotRail, still in Scotland with ScotRail at Inverness, and 156.503 is still at the same depot it was in 1992 at Corker Hill. It's in a different livery now, obviously it's in ScotRail livery, but it's still there, still working and still at the same depot. And it really, really is strange to note that all of those units are still in service 33 years later. I never thought that would be the case when I pressed the shutter. And finally, for that 1992 visit, here is the loco that got us there, 47500. As you can see, it was one of the locomotives that had been painted in Great Western green livery in 1985 as part of the Great Western 150th celebrations. It had been named Great Western, but by early 1992 the nameplates had been taken off, as had the cast metal number plates from the cab side. It had transfers put on instead, showing the number. And it was looking a little bit woebegone, a little bit sorry for itself, but appearances can be deceptive, and it was an absolute flying machine. It was in really, really good condition. Officially it was restricted to 90 miles per hour, but there was somebody in our carriage who was timing it on the mileposts and working out the speed, and apparently coming down from Beattock Summit it hit 106 miles an hour. And that's of course the driver's manager's watching, in which case it was doing a steady 90 all the way. But yeah, 106 miles an hour. Really, really good performance. It absolutely stormed all the way Hull to Edinburgh and back again. It was brilliant. It was new as D1943 in June 1996. It was renumbered 47500 under tops in March 1974. And it received the name Great Western in February 1979. And it was nominated at that point as the Western Region's Royal Train locomotive, so it was kept in a good condition. As we said, it was painted in Great Western green livery in 1985, and it was denamed in September 1991. About the year after this photo was taken, it was painted into Rail Express Systems red livery, still as 47500, and then later in 1993 it was, just after that, it was fitted with push-pull equipment and reclassified to a class 47-7, numbered 47770, and it was that the push-pull equipment was fitted and it was renumbered in May 1994. It gained the name Reserved and it was used by Rail Express Systems. It was withdrawn in February of 2004 and it was passed to the West Coast Railway Company. It re-entered traffic at some point, again carried its number 47500 in West Coast RAV, a nice maroon livery. Disaster then struck it, unfortunately. It was damaged in a derailment and fire in Salford in 2013. It was put into storage and unfortunately it was scrapped at West Coast's Carnforth base in 2019. What a shame, but for me, of course, it will always be the absolute flying machine that hauled me from Hull to Edinburgh and back, and that is how I'll remember it. Very, very nice indeed. And there it is, standing at Edinburgh Waverley, waiting for the return journey with its Edinburgh coastliner headboard on it as well. Just a little aside before we finish off, in the picture of me in front of the Class 91, you notice I was clutching a train spotting book, and there it is, I've still got it. Still there now, complete with a trainload freight sticker on the front. And just to finish off, we've got a Lothian bus. It's not in Edinburgh in 1992, because I didn't take any photographs of the buses in Edinburgh in 1992. I was still at school, film was expensive, and developing the films was even more so, I just didn't take any pictures of them. Luckily, Lothian set up an operation in York. Initially it operated open-top tow services in competition with Guide Friday, and that was in retaliation for a service that Guide Friday had begun in Edinburgh. But in the mid-90s, and by the time of this shot in 1997, they'd started to run a few school contracts and such things, and contracted services with some normal closed-top, i.e. roofed buses. And this is one of them, fleet number 624, registered GSC 624X. It had been transferred from Edinburgh not long before. It still had the Lothian livery, which the closed-top buses used for LRT York, the Lothian operation in York. It's still got the LRT names. All they've done is stick the word York under them. Otherwise than that, it's got its Edinburgh logos on, and it still appears to have a set of Edinburgh destination blinds, hence why there's a tram board in the windscreen telling you where it's going. So 624 was a Leyland Atlantean with Alexander AL type bodywork, typical of the ones that Lothian bought throughout the 1970s and into the early 80s, and it was new in August 1981. 16 years later, after 16 years in the Scottish capital, as I said, it was transferred down to the York operation, where we see it here outside York Station. The York operation was later sold to its local managers, who traded briefly as York Bus in the blue and white livery. What they did was they painted the maroon bits in dark blue. But shortly after they finished doing that, the operation went bust. And I don't know if 624 went to anybody else. I've not been able to trace it further after the York Bus operation. It may have been a bus that I saw in Wester Hailes as I passed through. It might have been a bus I saw in central Edinburgh as I was walking about. But as I say, I don't know. I didn't take any bus numbers. I didn't take any photographs, but there it is. That's kind of what brought us here. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Apologies for the lighting. I've been struggling with either too much light or too little, but yeah, so I hope it's not spoiled your enjoyment too much. But it's been something a bit different, a bit of a Scottish journey, and nice to look back at some photographs from the late 80s and the early 90s. So as always, thank you for joining me. Take care of yourselves and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.